Welcome to the DarshanTalks Pharmacy live stream and podcast. We discuss pharmacy entrepreneurship and issues that may arise. If you like these videos and podcasts, please like, leave a comment, please subscribe. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I have the chance, the privilege to introduce Liz Kukielka, and I never quite get her last name right, so I'm going to let her introduce herself. But I'm excited to speak to her because I have spoken to her over the years using various teleconferences, but I'm excited to actually do it and record and share this. But Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself and talk a little bit about how you might know me.
Yeah, so my name is Liz, and I currently work as a senior medical writer at Citrus Health Group. That's we're a medcoms agency, and our focus is largely in publications. So that's what I work on, things like abstracts, posters, manuscripts. We also do some consulting for medical affairs and market access. So that's another piece of the company. We're pretty small, so it's a really nice environment to get to work in. And I know we met through the biomedical writing program that had been at University of Sciences. So I just finished that program in May. So that was just in time before they fold it down. So that's how you and I got to know one another, and
awesome.
Been good.
Well, thank you again. Thank you again for being here. I was really excited when you said that you'd be open to doing this talk because you're truly an example of one of the people who has followed a bit of a non-traditional journey. You just started telling me a little bit about your journey before, but do you want to talk a little bit about how you got from well, I don't even want to say got from being a pharmacist to here, but your journey even before becoming a pharmacist was interesting. So how did you get here?
So we'll take it like all the way back. When I was younger, I was always interested in science, always interested in writing, probably like my two passions. But when I was, getting ready to go to college, I settled on English. And initially I thought I like writing. This is something I could see myself doing. And I got about halfway through my bachelor's degree and got to take a few science classes again as part of that. And that kind of like reignited an interest in science and medicine. And I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in pharmacy. So I finished my bachelor's, and the last couple of years I spent a lot of extra time writing. I was a writing tutor at school and in the surrounding community. And that was really the focus of my English degree. So I went right to pharmacy school from there at Temple in Philadelphia. And that's intense. So you're just science and a lot of chemistry and drugs all day and night. So I didn't really have a lot of time to do writing during that period. And when I was in school, and I think things are changing a little bit, but the focus was always like, are you going to go work in the hospital or are you going to go work in the community? And those were really the two main choices that are presented when you're a pharmacy student. So I did all my required hours. I started working in community pharmacy, and I did enjoy that. I got to really get to know my patients, and they trust you, and you're communicating with them, usually in just a conversation. But I was also communicating with, other healthcare providers, doctors, nurses. So, that's really the central part, besides knowing the medicine, is being able to communicate when you're working in the pharmacy. So, after a number of years, the schedule can be very tiring, working in a busy community pharmacy. So I started to explore the idea that I really love writing. And so how can I put these two things together? And I started trying to get into jobs where I would be able to start being a medical writer. That was the thing that came to mind. And I kind of faced this barrier of, well, you can't, you have writing experience and you have pharmacy background, but you haven't had any real medical writing experience. So we aren't, these are not the people that we're looking to hire. Um, so I said, okay. And I went and I researched it and I found that they offered a certificate in medical writing that I could do kind of like in my free time through the University of Chicago. And I did that program. And that gave me like a great introduction to kind of like all of the specifics of medical writing. And the teachers were all, practicing medical writers with different backgrounds. And that led to me getting my first job in medical writing. And then when I started working in it, I got, I wanted to learn even more. I was doing in my first job like promotional medical writing. But I knew there was so many other things out there. So that's when I applied to the biomedical writing masters at University of Sciences because I wanted to learn about the regulatory writing. I wanted to learn about the manuscript writing and all of those pieces. So um, the the extra educational pieces that like I sought out really like helped me get jobs in the field and get like the experience I needed to really make the complete shift to being a medical writer.
So there are a few different things that pop up, right? The first one that popped up for me is the idea of going from being a writer to being a pharmacist, and you still being told that that's not good enough. What was that like? Because there's a struggle. There's a I literally know how to write. Like I was trained to be a writer, and then you were trained in the science. Why is that not good enough? So how did you deal with that hurdle, if you will, mentally?
Yeah, it was a like it was a I don't know, it kind of took the wind out of my sails because I'm like, no, I know I can do this. Like I have lots of writing experience and they were just basically like, well, that's not the experience we want. And I was like, all right, well then I guess I have to figure this out. So I started in the when I was doing the University of Chicago program just like freelancing and I would just take any positions, any little pieces of writing that I could volunteer for with like professional societies I was in. I started writing news articles for like a physician website. I started writing blog posts for different types like dental websites, dermatology websites, and things like that. So I basically was like, all right, well, if you want me to prove that I can do this, I'll find whatever way I can and I'll prove it. So that's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because I think I'm thinking of the students who are either pharmacy students or they're pharmacists who are going, I want to transition out of traditional pharmacy, working in a retail pharmacy like you and I have. And I'm not
Yes.
suggesting that you can't enjoy retail pharmacy. I mean, I quite honestly enjoyed retail pharmacy, which a lot of people don't believe me, but the people were amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but the point is that some people are looking to transition, and that there's a mental jump you have to make, and there's a wall that you face, which goes, I know I can make a lot of money with this. One of the struggles you have as a retail pharmacist is you have what I refer to as golden handcuffs, which is it's a really high paying job with very high dissatisfaction,
Yeah.
or at least a very high rate of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
So, how did you get over that mental gap of I may need to take a pay cut?
Yeah, that's a really important point because I think it's something that a lot of people are not prepared for. But in the beginning, I was like, I know I'm gonna have to take a step back. I know that starting salaries for new medical writers are considerably lower than I was, a manager at Walgreens. So I was making a really good salary and we had really good benefits and things like that. So you just kind of have to accept that to take the leap forward, you have to take a step back. And in the course of like the 5 years that I've been in medical writing, I've jumped up um like over 20,000 in salary from my first job to my current job. So it's easy once you get into the field to start climbing up that ladder of a higher pay and more responsibility. But you just have to accept that when you get started, it may not be there. And some people will, and in the beginning when I was freelancing, I was still working. So you can kind of get your feet wet if you want, get some of that experience. And again, like I said, with the freelancing jobs, it wasn't about how much am I going to get paid for each of these things. It was just about demonstrating what I could do. And, by taking the leap there, I got like, I don't know, 15 short news articles published. So then I had this huge body of work that I could share and say, like, I wrote all of these pieces, and then that allowed me to kind of like climb up. So
Which I think is important because you've already talked about making a $20,000 jump in pay, and you've just started theoretically in May. Is that fair, or is that so? My point is,
no, yeah, yeah.
you're talking
Well,
about earlier
so that was from like my first job when I was finishing up the certificate at Chicago to now. So
to
over
now.
over about like 4 or 5 years, I've
Okay,
jumped that.
so let me ask you the next question. The big question that everyone sort of is wondering. Okay, maybe I can take a temporary pay cut. Are you caught up now with where you were retail?
I'm almost caught up. And the thing that, especially new grads can consider, I know that a lot of the pharmacy jobs now in retail and things like that are starting way lower than they were when I graduated. There was such high demand when I graduated in 2008 that, I mean, I even got a sign-on bonus back then.
Yeah,
So my understanding is that a lot of the starting pharmacy salaries are a lot lower. So, like, keeping that in mind, especially for new grads, it's probably not going to be a huge difference with what they would be making in any of these entry level jobs. And especially considering, some people do residencies, and that wasn't something that I wanted to pursue. But you can get experience in other ways. On the job experience a lot of times is just as meaningful, because you consider people doing like 1 to 2 years of residency. That's a huge, that's just a small salary that they're getting when they're doing that. So, if you spend those couple of years as like an entry level writer or whatever the kind of pharmacy you want to get into, then you can kind of pick up the salary, and I think you'll pretty much be in the same place.
yeah. So obviously salary, you're almost caught up. How's job satisfaction?
Oh, it's it's night and day. You know, being in a busy corporate, retail chain, you were really micromanaged for everything. Even that, I mean, I think they've started giving them like real lunch breaks now, but we didn't have that when I worked there.
Yeah, me
Um,
neither.
and there were days where I could work like a 10 or 12-hour shift, and if like I had a minute to run to the bathroom, that was like a rare occasion. Now I I essentially make my own schedule. I have some meetings and calls that I get on with clients that, are on the schedule, but in order, if I need to do things with my son, I can run out and go, to his school to volunteer in the middle of the day. I'm not working at night unless I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get caught up on this project. But it's not the expectation. Weekends, not the expectation. Holidays, not the expectation. So that, like, the amount of stress that I used to have versus what I have now, and I'll go into my own pharmacy where I get my medications filled, and I see the pharmacist behind the counter, and I'm like, I really feel for her.
Yeah.
The one day I was in there and she was like coughing, and I could tell she was sick, but it's like you're just expected to be there, sick, healthy, no matter what else you have going on, and I don't have that anymore, and so it's just really improved my quality of life and given me like more time with my family. So,
So I think what you're sort of describing is that initial piece, which is the strengths, which is you are semi caught up with the um, with your previous role as a retail pharmacist, there's higher in terms of salary. There's higher job satisfaction, a lot more leeway in your schedule. Any
Yeah.
other strengths of this type of job?
It they really, like, invest in, and especially where I'm at now, they invest in our personal, like, professional development. When I worked in retail, it was like, if it's not, contributing to the bottom line of what the pharmacy needs, then there was, like, very little interest in encouraging us to, like, go out and, like, say, attend a professional conference or network with people. And I like, when I worked in retail, I didn't have the time where I could, like, participate in, like, the alumni association at Temple. So I'm now able to do that because my schedule has my nights open, so I can go to a dinner or things that I might not be able to do when I worked in retail. And I just went to the American Medical Writers Association conference. My company was, like, happy to send myself and one of my coworkers. So that was really nice, not only, to have their support, but, like, the time off, to kind of get everything that we could out of the meeting, because I think they recognize that if we get better as writers, like, it's good for the company too. So there's just so much more of that, like, professional development, which I felt like I really didn't get when I was a retail pharmacist.
So I am curious. You just did the AMWA conference, which is one of the I believe is the largest one in the country for medical
Yeah.
writers. If that's true, you have a sense of the population. How many pharmacists approximately did you see when you were there?
I would say, and I know, and I've written articles for AMWA, so I think it's, like, in the range of maybe like 10% of people that are, involved in taking the surveys are pharmacists. I'm the only pharmacist at my company, but we are small, so there's only about 9 or 10 full-time writers. Everyone else is either a PhD or an MD. But at the conference, I did meet a lot of other pharmacists, so that was really cool. Because I've seen them on, LinkedIn and things like that, but, like, very rarely get to actually, like, talk to them. And I would say, like, almost every pharmacist that I know that works in medical writing got here by different paths. Some of them were working as clinical pharmacists, and then they again wanted that, like, flexibility and job satisfaction that they weren't getting in the hospital, and so they moved over. There are people that I find a lot of pharmacists that I know specialize in, like, the medical education, continuing medical education, continuing pharmacy education, so they do those pieces. So that was pretty cool to meet other pharmacists and see, like, what paths they took to get to where we are, and we all kind of said the same thing. We didn't know about what we could do when we were in school, but now there's just they're getting the word out. And I mean, I even get contacted um, through LinkedIn and for other, like, webinars that I've done, where people just want to know, how do I do this? What can I do to transition? And then I had someone from the University of Toledo reach out, and she was running a class for third year pharmacy students, and she was inviting people with non-traditional pharmacy careers to come speak to class and give them an overview. So I did that a few weeks ago, and that was really cool because it was a class of, like 20 to 30 students. And basically, like, they had so many questions about what they could do, what the job involved. So just, like, earlier and earlier working this into the curriculum and giving it as, like, another viable option.
So, what you're talking about is the fact that there are so many options. One of the things I do like to caution pharmacists. Just in terms of my experience and why I used to teach at the University of the Sciences is I was VP of Regulatory Strategy and Policy for one of the largest medical writing companies in the world. So I had a fair amount of dealing with pharmacists and sort of medical writers from my experience, plus obviously 10 years of teaching at U Sciences. And my experience was that pharmacists routinely think that because they have the science degree, they now know how to write. And that's been not my experience.
Yeah.
In fact, you literally went to English school. I don't know how to call it
Yeah.
to learn how to write English. You have a professional degree as someone in English, and even then they gave you a little bit of a push. And you said, "I will demonstrate that I have the writing chops to do this." And I think that that's an important lesson, that because I see a lot of pharmacists who say, "I'll take the pay cut, but I'm not going to have to prove myself." And I think
Yeah.
you've got to be able to be a little bit more humble and take the chance that this is a different way of using your degree, and therefore you may have to learn along the process. And I think that if you come in with that attitude, you're likely to succeed, or
Yeah.
at least more likely to succeed than if you come in there with "I know everything."
Yeah.
So that would be my little bit to add there. What other weaknesses do you think your job has? Like, one is the fact that pharmacy school didn't quite prepare us for a degree to be medical writers. What else?
Yeah. I think one of the challenges, especially when you're doing like I had a position for a few years where I was writing manuscripts about my own research, but most jobs in medical writing, you're working with other people doing research, scientists, clinicians, and you're trying to guide them to create the best piece of work, whether it's an abstract, getting like a lot of information into a small space, visualizing things on a poster, or a manuscript, and you might be consulting with them on what journal would be a good fit for this based on how long is the manuscript going to be, how many tables and figures do we want in there to really display the data. So you're just a consultant and you can only do so much to they you can't make them take your advice. At the end of the day, you have to put the information in that the authors want. You typically don't serve as an author unless you're part of the research. So you're just the writer. And that's a little humbling, and that's a hard thing to learn, because especially people who are used to being in a position where the pharmacist is maybe making recommendations, and especially in clinical pharmacy where they might be the ones writing like the orders and things like that, to taking this like step back and just accepting that you're a piece of the puzzle. And my bosses, the scientific directors that I work with, are very good at teaching me how to kind of put things in the manuscript and put queries in such a way that you're kind of eliciting the response that you want from the authors. But you do have to, at the end of the day, it's their work and they
Right.
get to decide what's in there, and all we can do is advise.
Right. Um, Related to that are threats. So one threat might be the fact that you may still be on the learning curve, and you're still trying to figure out your chops. What are some other threats to your role as a medical writer? Um, what obviously another one that I can think of now is the fact that we're in the pharma industry, which tends to have more layoffs and then have mass hiring.
Yeah.
So that's the other threat. Any other threats that come to mind for you?
Um, yeah, I think it's just the sort of, like you said, the learning curve, and there is uncertainty, and you might be expecting to work on certain types of projects, and then the workload may not be the types of projects you were expecting. You might have
Mm,
new things thrown at you.
yeah, yeah.
I tell my boss all the time, like, I hate the feeling of not knowing something and having to learn something new, because, if you give me a manuscript, sure, I can hammer that out. But, you know, um, they're letting me start to work on some of the publication planning and strategy and kind of work through that. So that's new to me, and that's really uncomfortable. I don't like the feeling like I don't know something. And then, I was just recently working on a manuscript where we had to write a response to peer reviewers. And it was so apparent that the peer reviewer didn't understand the type of research. And it made me crazy. Like, I was struggling with it for like probably a couple of weeks to get to the place where we could craft the answers and we could address the concerns, but kind of like maintain what was in the manuscript. So, like, accepting that you don't know everything and that you have to learn new things. And there are just so many types of medical writing that you might be really good at, like a few of them, but there might be other ones that you're not so great at. And you have to make the choice, like, do you just want to keep doing one thing and be really good at those few things, or do you want to have like greater breadth and be able to do a lot of things. Like, I don't do a lot of slide decks. I don't think slide decks are my strong suit, but when I get like a chance, like, I'll work on that. And there are other writers that I work with that are really good at slide decks. So it's like, we can learn from each other, but taking the chances to learn something new.
Which I would argue is also the opportunity, which is you
Yeah,
get to do the things and you get to grow. And therefore, you're constantly learning, you're constantly, quite bluntly, inventing. You are at a certain point creating from whole cloth, which
yeah,
which lets you express yourselves in ways that we just didn't as clinicians.
yeah.
Um, so I think that's kind of awesome. What are the other opportunities that come by, according to you?
I'm just having a lot of opportunity to interact with students now, and that has been really rewarding for me. I mean, I spent years in retail wanting to like precept students, and if I wasn't at a busy enough store, the chain didn't have time to let me do that. I worked for even places with medical writing, and they didn't have time for allowing me to do that. Now I just got to precept students in their fourth year of pharmacy school, which was really cool. And it was great for this. It's great for me because I'm getting to like learn about like teaching other new writers, but also, it was really unique because it was a remote I'm remote, so the rotation was remote. I went down and like met them at school because I'm local to Philadelphia, but everything else was online, so they got to experience that a little bit. And just to see, what somebody who's truly new to the field, what do they know? What things do I take for granted? So it helped me to develop my skills as a teacher. I also am starting to help with teaching new writers within my company and helping them learn. So it's, I'm getting, I was used to giving people feedback on writing because I've been doing that for, over a decade in different types of writing, but like specifically in this, explaining things that you're doing, like, it's just allowed me to develop those skills. And then I've been, in touch with a couple of programs about possibly doing like a medical writing course within a master's program in writing studies, or doing a medical writing course at a pharmacy school for third year students. So I'm kind of exploring that and working those things out. And that's just not something I had the chance to do before I became a medical writer.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm really, really excited and glad to hear you're sort of flourishing the way you are. So, congratulations to you.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
bef- Before we go, any last parting words of advice?
Just if there is a path that you want to take, it might be hard. There might be obstacles, but um, don't give up if there's something that you really want to do. Because if you had, asked me 8 years ago, I felt a little discouraged trying to go down this road, but I eventually figured it out. And reach out to people who can help. I mean, I can't say enough about you and the other teachers at University of Sciences and helping me. Um, all the teachers I met at University of Chicago, and then just networking with people on LinkedIn, or I like the Alumni Association at Temple because there's people working in all different fields, and that gives you a chance to meet new people. So just try to get experience in any way you can and make all the connections you can, and I think eventually people will get there.
Speaking of connections, would you be okay with people reaching out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I can
And
give you
how
my
can people
email.
find you? Awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Perfect. Well, we'll share the email as well. So,
yeah,
Liz, this was wonderful. Thank you so much again for coming on. And
yeah.
I'm excited to possibly have you back on in the future. And huge congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me too.
These conversations are not intended to be legal, regulatory, or clinical advice and may not be right for you. These conversations are intended for educational purposes only. Conversations on this forum do not create an attorney